Thank you guys for being here. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. I'm super excited to be here to talk about Blossom, how it relates to my practice as an artist, but also just my journey through that. I do have a question. How do I use this clicker? Do I just click through it? Okay, cool. That was easy. I'm an artist, not someone who's good with technology, obviously, so hopefully we can get through this really easily. Today I had you guys answer the prompt of what does it mean to blossom. So you did that with an image or with a word. And so that's something I want to investigate today. What does it mean to actually blossom? How can a person blossom, right? So if you look to the person next to you, their imagery, their word is probably going to be very different from yours. That's the whole point of blossoming. It's recognizing where you've come from, how you've grown from that point to be the better version of yourself. So I'm going to take you on a journey of that and what that looks like to me. There are two different journeys that I will be exploring here, two different bodies of work that have experienced through this. And I want to, again, kind of share my lived experiences with you. I will be touching on how I've grown, how I've become the person I am today, but also bringing in my community. There's a portion of my work that I've invited people to be a part of. I've interviewed them, and they've described what it means to blossom as well. So I am a tapestry, a quilt maker. I create tapestry-like quilts. I am focusing on, again, my lived experiences. What has that been like to kind of navigate this world that is kind of unforgiving? We are thrown with a lot of chaos at us, and I want to discuss everyone's pain on how you've gone through those hardships and how you can grow from those points. That's really important to my practice, is showing that healing process. And so that's where blossoming really comes into play. I'm not only telling these really hard truths, but I'm sharing these moments of celebration. How can a person, again, rise above certain experiences? How can they be that better person? Which is hard today, right? How can you get to your lowest point, but then also rise from that? Especially if you're looking at politics, stuff like that, right? We're all in this kind of maybe doom and gloom. And so how can we grow together to be a better community through that process? So the first journey I would like to talk about is this work here. I was touching on the complexity of identifying as biracial, but also being adopted by a white family. I grew up in the South, so I'm from Georgia, and there I experienced a lot of prejudice, figuring out how do I fit in within my own family, but also the people around me. So my work really touched on that, the pains, but also the joys of growing up in a white family and also a predominantly white neighborhood. Through this work, I was exploring themes of pain and triumph, exclusion and acceptance. So with all my work, there's always this pain component, but there's always this blossoming effect that happens afterwards. For me, I can't describe the pain without showing the beautiful outcome of growing from it. They're hand in hand. And so that's why that's really important. When I sew into my pieces, that's where that healing comes into play. It's about showing the opening and closing of a wound. So telling my story to you guys today is going to be opening that wound, but also by the end, I'll be closing it by finishing my talk and experiencing or sharing my experiences with you guys. And so that's how my work started, and I'm going to kind of dive into a few pieces that explore that. Maybe? There we go. All right, so this is one of my first pieces that I created in grad school that was focusing on tapestry-like quilts. I was trained as a painter and a draftswoman, And so coming into grad school, I was very sure. I was like, I'm going to be just a painter. I know exactly what I want to talk about. But in grad school, they really push you. They get you to question your work, and you kind of think, man, this is not good anymore. So I got to that point, and I wanted to kind of find out, okay, how can I really push myself as an artist? How can I really tell these stories through the work? And so I discovered quilt makers. I discovered, oh, this is how they're embedding stories, meaning into their work, and I wanted to figure out how I could do that as well. And so I started creating really small embroidery pieces. They were like 4 by 6 inches. Again, I still wasn't really happy with that process, and so I kind of continued to push and expand what I could do with a piece. And so I created these larger-than-life tapestry-like quilts, incorporating all my emphasis. So I incorporated painting, screen printing in that process, drawing. So it became this mixed media, this idea of like, how can I tell all these stories, combine all these mediums to kind of show the messy, chaotic life that a person can go through that process. The story here, though, this is about being adopted. It touches on my birth mother, the fears that I had of being abandoned by her. I had other half-siblings that she did not give up, but I was the only one to give up. So I always question, why me? Was I not enough? Why did you want to give me up? Granted, I am so happy that that happened, because my life would be very different if it hadn't. So there's a lot of good that came from it, but also as an adoptee, that's something you question often. And so I wanted to explore that, the fears of that. I've also depicted my adopted grandmother in this piece. She was very hesitant about my family adopting me. She was afraid that their life would change, that they wouldn't be invited to parties, that they wouldn't be invited to country clubs. She even said to my adopted mother, there are other Black Christian families that could adopt her. So she really didn't want me part of the family just because of the fear of bringing in a person of color. And so I wanted to explore that, especially with our relationship. We had a really turbulent relationship growing up, to the point where I was a child. She made me eat tuna fish out of the trash can. During that time, thinking back as a kid, that was very traumatic, but I think in her mind, she thought I was wasting food. Either way, it kind of just shows the relationship that we had. It wasn't great. There was always this tension that was occurring, and so I wanted to really depict those moments. And throughout the piece here, I have upside down faces that are screaming, kind of reacting to both of those scenarios, how I was feeling at the time. And I also depicted my adopted grandmother without any lips. She's being silenced now. I'm taking control of this narrative in this story and how she's made me feel. The triumphant aspect of this piece is that I included my adopted mother in this piece as a child. So you can see a childlike image kind of pieced together throughout the background. And to me, that is representing how such an innocent person raised by my adopted grandmother could rise above her. How could she open her arms to not only myself, but my younger brother, who's also biracial and adopted, to welcome us into the space and disregard the fears of her own mother. So she was that generational change that needed to happen within my family. And so I wanted to, again, touch on those painful moments of not being accepted, but also being accepted through that process. And so the figure in the middle of that is a representation of me as an adult, realizing I can rise above both of these women and their actions towards me. And one thing you'll see throughout my work as well is there are always these floral elements. I am obsessed with plants. If you come to my place, I have over probably 150 houseplants. So to me, it's again about this growth. How can you show that with each piece? So most of the plants that I use represent new growth, new beginnings, to kind of show that transition, that growth that occurs within a piece. And so it just adds that extra element of healing through that process. Transitioning to this work here, I Know Why the Southern Black Girl Sang. This one here is touching on my experiences of growing up in the South, being a ballerina, and kind of those experiences that occurred during that time. It's also referencing Maya Angelou, specifically a quote that I was really inspired by. She was touching on the displacement of a Southern Black girl how it's kind of jarring and it's like the rest of a razor against your throat. So kind of touching on those prejudices that you can experience, what it's like, the exclusion that happens there. So I wanted to include that to really touch on how I felt growing up in Georgia, going to a college in Georgia as well, where people often told me I sounded too white, I was not black enough, and so kind of bringing in all those emotions into this piece. I'm also touching on Degas' work, specifically his ballerina at age 14. I wanted to tie in classical beauty, but also tie in the objectification of women. So during that time, if you're not familiar with his work, the patrons, including Degas, mistreated the ballerinas. They were called les petites rats, so little rats. So I wanted to tie that in with how I felt as a ballerina. I was always told that I had too much muscle mass, that I wouldn't fit in as a ballerina. And so I wanted to touch on those experiences while also touching on growing up in the South. But Maya Angelou comes through in this piece once again. Behind the figure that is standing, there is an open bird cage. Rather than it being closed, I wanted the cage to be open to represent that despite what you've gone through, despite the prejudice that you've faced, you can always set yourself free. That's why there's floral elements behind it kind of floating around the figure. There's insects, like vintage patches by the shoulder of the figure, kind of flying away. So again, it's representing how you can set yourself free and grow from these experiences. Shifting on, my work begins, maybe not. Okay, there we go. Shifting on, my work begins to change ever so slightly. I begin to start focusing on how is healing a part of this. I wanted to focus more on the joyous aspect. Excuse me. So this piece here, Stories of Remembrance, is about reclaiming my roots. So again, I grew up in Georgia. I grew up on a farm. And so the farm aspect of my childhood is something that I wanted to hide from other people. I was somehow ashamed to tell people that I grew up on a farm. I liked riding horses, especially in high school. I thought people would see me as different, and again, being biracial, being adopted, I wanted to do anything to fit in. So I created this piece a couple years ago, and it's about a moment where I finally came home, and I think I was around 27 or 28, and I realized I absolutely love my home. I love being a farm girl. I love riding horses. And so I wanted to reclaim that. I wanted to really show this moment of happiness, being surrounded by these farm animals, kind of representing a field in the background, more abstracted, to kind of show this freedom that occurs with being home. Further symbolizing that with this piece, as I've embroidered my childhood cowboy boots on the edge of the piece there, so kind of tying in that upbringing and how it's occurred over time. From there, I shift into this piece here. So this is one of the pieces that I kind of ended this series with. It's titled Daffodil. If you're not familiar with daffodils, they're the first flower to bloom after winter. So symbolizing that the end of dark days are over, and it's a sign of new beginnings. So I wanted to create this piece to kind of represent that I'm a fully healed person. I've accepted who I am, where I've come from, and I'm stepping out of the woods now. I'm no longer being held back by those hardships, the experiences that I faced through that time. This piece was also an eye-opening moment for me, because growing up, my mom made me do chores where I had to plant daffodil bulbs with her every fall, something that I absolutely hated doing. I used to cry about it because I just didn't want to be out in the dirt. I didn't want to help her shovel and dig things. But ironically, daffodils have become one of my favorite flowers. It's one of the flowers that, again, kind of symbolizes this new hope that is coming, this light at the end of the tunnel for me, which my mom and I also laugh about now because she remembers it vividly how much I hated that. So it's just ironic, and it's become a symbol that I use throughout my work now to really represent this healing moment that occurs. All right, so to my second journey, this is my series of One Must Not Wither and Blossom. I created these a couple years ago. This is during a time where I got really burnt out at work. I was like saying yes to every opportunity, and I felt like I was just constantly drowning. And so I wanted to create a series that kind of represented the feelings that I was going through, kind of acknowledging that it's okay if I wither at times, but I'm gonna blossom again. So these are what these pieces are representing here. They're also touching on resilience and how a person can persevere and rise above certain experiences. So as a storyteller and with creating my pieces, I often write poems that accompany them. So it's more of an insight into what the piece is about, the story that's going on with the work. So this is Blossom 3, and I wanted to create 3 different figures representing my past, my present, and my future. So again, kind of showing this growth. We have the figure there in the front, kind of arms stretched out, representing this protection between the other figures. So they're surrounded by floral motifs, both soft sculptures and screen printed elements, just representing this rebirth, this growth that is occurring here. But again, this series is about acknowledging that you can wither, you can be okay, but when it's time, you can blossom again. Your light is not over yet. From there, I shift into one of my newer series. So here is an example of me working on a piece. This piece is titled We Can Grow or Wither. So kind of taking influence from my Blossom series, kind of discussing how a person can grow from certain events. So this body of work that I created, I interviewed 6 women and told my story as well. So there was a total of 7 women. And they discussed their hardships from childhood up until adulthood. So that's anything from sexual assault to divorce to physical abuse. They described it in detail, and then most importantly, this series was about celebrating them. So again, discussing how could they go through these horrific events to become this light now. And so this is the altarpiece that I created for it. It's about how we can all come together, even though our stories are very different, but we've all experiencing something traumatic, right? It's about allowing the audience to acknowledge each of us and to listen to what has occurred. Behind this piece here, I'm referencing Henry Matisse, one of my favorite artists, and specifically his piece, The Dance. So that is one of my favorite pieces as well, and that one represents beauty, it represents joy, and it represents celebration. So again, I wanted to include that with these works to again just acknowledge what these women have gone through and just really show this celebration act. So here is the fully finished piece of it. I also created a poem for this series and specifically for this piece that describes, kind of the feelings of who will listen to us, how will we survive, how can we thrive in a society that often ignores, right? So I wanted to propose these questions for my audience when viewing it, but also realize towards the end that despite these hardships, despite what people have said, we can grow from this. We can weave ourselves back together. And so that's what this piece is about. We have told these stories to each other, and we're piecing ourselves back together by acknowledging these shared moments that occur. So this is a larger-than-life piece here created. You can see there's the daffodil images happening throughout. There is the monarch butterfly as well represented in this piece, which represents that new growth and new beginnings once again. Following this altarpiece and showing each figure on this piece here, I created individual pieces per my participants. So those pieces there really detailed their stories and kind of showed the more celebration aspect of that as well. So here is one of the pieces. So pink is for girls and blue is for boys, and this is a story based off my friend Marielle. And so this piece here, she discussed wearing a mask her entire life until she got married. She thought she had to hide parts of herself because her family was not accepting of her. She grew up in a Catholic church, and so when she came out as gay and she was telling her mom at 6 years old, her mom walked away. Her mom didn't want to hear it. She didn't want to acknowledge that this is her feelings, that she liked girls rather than boys. So during that time as a 6-year-old, she thought she had to be silent about it. She thought she had to change who she was in order to fit in. There's even times when she liked the color blue, but people told her she could not like the color blue. She had to like pink because she's a girl. So this piece is about touching on those traumas, touching on being silenced, but also showing the celebration of unmasking yourself towards the end. So she is 30 years old. She just married the love of her life a couple years ago. And so this piece and her stance is about showing how she's living her best life now. Within the piece too, I often will add text to it. So the text is referencing kind of, again, those hardships. So the first part is trauma has different forms, which it does. Every person experiences trauma differently. Also, the way that we heal is different from each person. So it touches on that, but it also has these moments of, what would you change? I've asked that question to my participants. If you had the power, what would you change, or what would you do differently, or what would you tell your younger self? And so one of her things was to be confident, and to kind of grow with herself and to acknowledge who she was rather than hiding it. So this is the piece that I created about my own story. So this is Wildflower. This piece, there's lots of parts of my story that is being depicted here. Here I am touching on growing up as biracial, being adopted once again. I'm touching on having a learning disability, and also touching on, excuse me, how I've had family members tell me that I would never be successful in life. Thought I shouldn't go to college because of my learning disability, and how I'm able to rise above that. It's also touching on my own experience with sexual assault, how I've grown through that stage of my life as well. And so again, with all the figures that are surrounding it, they're each protecting each other. They're reaching out to different versions of myself. I'm also kind of representing the 3 graces and their stances and how they're all connected to each other. And then the figure that's in the back that has the cutout, I wanted to represent the past and the present being intertwined. So the use of my cutouts and cutting out different shapes is how I symbolize that. I want to show things that are being mended side by side, but also things that have been taken away. So this piece is, despite all those hardships that I've gone through, despite all the things that I've endured, it's about acknowledging each other. It's about acknowledging how different our stories are and how we can grow together as a group. And then today, you all created your own little tapestry-like quilts. You all entered the prompt of using an image or a word to describe what blossoming represents to you. So we're gonna come together, we're gonna sew a tapestry-like quilt and share in our moments of personal growth and how we can grow together. So thank you. Also, if you have questions, feel free to ask as well. Happy to take any. Yes.
Question. So when you work very tactile,
Mm-hmm.
tapestry and things, do you, other than kind of having an idea of the concept and doing the deeper work,
Yep.
sketch out things before you place them?
No. So my practice is, yes, I know the story that I usually want to tell. Sometimes I don't even know the poses, but I rely heavily on my intuition. I don't even know the patterns I want to use, the colors I want to use. I just start with the story, start with the background canvas, and then I just start drawing from there. And then it turns into a dance, I would say, is like I'm always in my studio gravitating towards different materials, kind of like, will this work? Holding it up to a different material and so forth. Yeah?
When does the writing come in? Is that
It depends. So it really depends on how painful experience is for me. Sometimes the writing will come before, and then sometimes it will come after. So the piece We Can Grow or Wither, the writing came before I knew exactly how I wanted to create that final piece. Same thing with blossoming. That one, I had to get out all those like burnt out feelings, the drowningness. So I started with the poems. There's 3 different ones that I wrote, and then I created this series based off of that. Yeah?
How do you like to acquire the materials you upcycle?
Yeah, so I go to Indigo Hippo. That's one of my favorite places to get materials. And then also the Grand Antique Mall, I go there as well to purchase it, but mostly Indigo Hippo, especially for all the tassels, the ballet point shoes I got from there as well. So yeah, just really depends on what I'm looking for. Sometimes I'll go to Goodwill to get my fabric. So the We Can Grow piece, I can go back here as well. So the background of this piece here, I actually got at Goodwill. It was in their like bed sheet department. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I think I remember seeing on your website, and another fiber artist talked about this with me once, that you feel a relationship between kind of women throughout history who have been quilters
Yep.
and taking what may have been dismissed in the past as just craft and elevating
Yep.
it to an art form. I wonder if you could say more about that.
Yeah, so me specifically, I was really inspired by G's Bin quilt makers. And so I was looking at their work, especially during grad school when I was taking that shift. But their quilts were stolen from them and their stories were stolen. And so for me, yes, I am inspired by quilt makers, but I want to leave room for their history. And so that's why I call them tapestry-like quilts, because to me, they are, yes, they're quilts, but they're also still paintings in my mind. So I wanted to kind of create these hybrid between the two, of like how can I create my own visual language through this, but also showing my inspiration from painters, but also quilt makers as well. I mean, I look at Bisa Butler, if you guys are familiar with her work, a very contemporary artist who does portraiture now. So there's a lot of portrait artists doing textile stuff that is occurring. You can see a lot of resemblance in my work as well. But I want to give them breath. I want to give them space to create that history and then also find my own kind of path through that. Yeah.
How did you get into teaching and what do you like best about it?
Yeah, okay. So I came to grad school at UC DAP back in 2019. And then I took a workshop class there that allowed me to teach. I didn't come to grad school thinking I would teach. It just kind of happened that way. But then while I was teaching, I realized I really enjoy talking to students, kind of seeing where their minds are at and how they grow as an artist as well. So from there, I just kind of continued teaching around. I was adjuncting a lot at UC, and then I was adjuncting a little bit at NKU. And then they offered me a full-time, and I was like, sure, I'll take it. That would be great. So yeah, I really enjoy seeing people grow. Seeing them heal through this process too. A lot of students have experienced a lot of hardships as well. And so the way that I like to teach is give them grace to explore those thoughts and those processes. I teach upper level students mostly, and sometimes a drawing one for foundation. So when I get those upper level students, it's about exploring your existence, exploring what kind of artist do you want to be. And so it's about just learning with each other through that process, and that's what I enjoy most about it. Yeah?
Where do you keep your pieces? Do you have any exhibits?
So I'm actually doing a residency with Artworks currently, so if you guys want to check it out, the opening is October 24th. But usually my pieces are stored in my studio, or they're with my gallery in New York, or if I'm showing other places, they'll have a few of my pieces that way. Yeah? Everything is hand stitch. I've used a sewing machine before. I was taught on that as well, but I really like seeing my hand in the process, and that's also how I get the healing out. Because a lot of times I'm stabbing my fingers on accident. There's a lot of bleeding. There's a lot of like annoyance happening. Yeah.
Her fingers have to hurt.
Oh yeah, my fingers hurt a lot. I have like a pinched nerve too in my shoulder. Like, I also do wood cutouts and sew into that. So like there's different elements of how I really embed the sewing, the healing process in it. I put a pause on the wood cutouts because that one hurts a lot. But yeah, this is kind of where I'm at currently. And sometimes I'll have like, sewing machine elements added to it, but mostly everything is hand stitched. So, yeah.
Is there a common thread in like stories you want to tell and continue to tell?
Yeah, so currently I'm actually kind of going back to my upbringing with a few of my pieces, but it's also relating to political events that are currently happening. So I'm working on a new series, Before a Ruin, A Cry. So there's probably 4 to 5 pieces that I'm currently working on, and it's about my lived experiences and how I felt silenced by one of my family members and them just not acknowledging my own experiences and telling me this is what it should be. You're too liberal. You shouldn't have gone to school, basically. And so kind of tying in all those feelings, relating it to what's politically happening right now. Those series are also referencing James Baldwin, kind of saying like, hey, if we don't change, we're gonna catch everything on fire. It's also looking at Octavia Butler. I've been reading her books, Parable of the Talents, Parable of the Sower, which to me, if you haven't read it, you should read it because it really relates to what we're seeing currently. So I'm pulling threads from both of those, really looking at her themes and kind of how can I use those themes to address what I'm feeling, what is currently going on. So it's about kind of reflecting the past and the present through that. So I have a piece that kind of shows the Statue of Liberty, but it's taking reference from the birth of Venus, so kind of showing different elements. Instead of books, there's an embroidery of the White House on fire, so kind of little snippets of like what's to come if we don't change. And then instead of a torch, I have a sledgehammer, which represents resilience to me. And then there's an embroidered text that says, kindness eases change. So that's a big part of that series and talking about it just because I feel like we've lost that as humanity, or human beings, right? How can we show more kindness for each other? How can we share our experiences together as well? Yeah, anything else? Cool. All right, well, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it.